order the Assembly of Delegates Wednesday, November 18th, 2020, 4 p.m. If we could please have a moment of silence to honor our troops who have died to serve our country and all of those serving our country in the armed forces. Let's please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Could we please have a roll of the assembly by the clerk?
Douglas Brown.
Brown here.
Mary Chafee. Here. Terrence Gallagher.
Here.
Lillian Green. Here. Elizabeth Harder.
Here.
Christopher Kanega. James Killian.
Here.
Suzanne McAuliffe. Deborah McCutcheon. Thomas O'Hara.
Here.
John Oman.
Here.
Brian O'Malley.
Here.
Randy Potash. Randy Potash. Patrick Princey.
Here.
Linda Zern.
Here.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, you have a quorum with 82.48% of the delegates present. 17.52% are absent.
Thank you. Could we please have a motion to approve today's calendar of business?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Doug Brown. Doug Brown.
Yes, I vote yes.
Mary Chafee. Mary Chafee.
Yes.
Terry Gallagher.
Yes.
Lillian Green.
Yes.
Elizabeth Harder.
Yes.
Jim Killian.
Yes.
Thomas O'Hara.
Yes.
Brian O'Malley.
Yes.
John Oman. Did I
Yes.
miss him? Yeah.
It's John.
All right. Randy Potash there yet? No. Patrick Princey.
Yes.
Linda Zern.
Yes.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, you have approval on the business calendar of 82.48% of the delegates voting yes, 17.52% are absent.
Thank you. Moving on to the approval of the Journal of November 4th, 2020 with any possible corrections. A motion?
I'll move approval. Second.
All those in favor with a roll call?
Doug Brown,
Yeah.
Mary Chafee,
Yes.
Terry Gallagher,
Yes.
Lillian Green,
Yes.
Elizabeth Harder,
Yes.
Jim Killian,
Yes.
Tom O'Hara,
Yes.
John Oman,
Yes.
Brian O'Malley,
Yes.
Patrick Princey,
Yes.
Linda Zern.
Yes.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Journal of 11-4 is approved with 82.48% of the delegates voting yes, 17.52% are absent.
Thank you. Next, communications and an update from our Board of Regional Commissioners, and we have Commissioner Bergstrom with us today. Thank you, Commissioner Bergstrom, for being here, as always.
Okay, well, good afternoon. First, let me start by apologizing for not having anyone give our report at your last meeting. We didn't have a meeting that morning, and with the excitement of the election, I simply forgot. It wasn't out of disrespect, believe me. And I talked to Jack, and he said, yes, he forgot as well. So I apologize. So I'm going to go back to the last meeting I reported on, which was the meeting of October 28th. And at that meeting, we had our usual update on the COVID-19 in Barnstable County. you'll get a report on that from when I talk about today's meeting. We had quite a presentation by the Cape and Vineyard Electric Cooperative on fiscal year 2020 energy production. Did you guys get that? No, you didn't. Well, I'll have you sent the PowerPoint because I couldn't possibly give it justice. It's quite complicated. We also had a number of ordinances. One was the ordinance to make supplemental appropriations the amount of $75,000 for purchase of natural resources management equipment for wildlife mitigation. I believe that went to you and came back to us and we approved it. We also had several ordinances which also have gone to you and back to us for approval, which was to authorize us to create special stabilization funds. We created a general stabilization fund, a capital stabilization fund, and an emergency stabilization fund. If you remember, and we deposited $3 million, you approved a deposit of $3 million into those funds. There they are. And then we authorized, after transferring funds of the $75,000, we then authorized the award to Northeast Fire and Management to provide our equipment for wildfire preparation equipment. So you remember this. They were going out of the business. We purchased our equipment for $75,000. So now we're going to do, if it comes to that, wildfire preparation, Cape Cod. Okay, that covers us for the 28th. All right, that goes to now. Last week, once again, we had an update on the COVID. I asked for a health department and the finance department to give us a report on possible Cape-wide testing center to address the dire need to increase affordable Cape Cod Corona-19 testing on Cape Cod. You know, some areas in the state, they do have testing low cost or no cost testing available. I was hoping we could come up with a plan to do that here. I'll get back into it when I talk about this meeting, and I got a report back from the health department. We got a report on the 12th, an update on Barnstable County Sheriff's pension liability and related legislation. I think your former colleague, Sue Moran, has submitted some legislation to the Senate, and Sarah Peak has submitted some legislation as an outside section for the budget. The did not make it into the House budget itself, so she's submitting it as an outside section. If Jack is here, he could probably give you a better read on that because he's in constant contact with both Sue and Sarah, and also with Terry Murray, who's been very helpful in doing that. So we're optimistic. We've been optimistic before, but we're equally optimistic this time around. We looked at your resolution 20-07 to support Massachusetts shellfisher growers and harvesters by authorizing a pilot program to allow shellfishing to sell directly to consumers. Now, did this come from, I think, Lily? Did you submit this? It came from Wellfleet, right? Okay, so we took it up, and of course, it's my opinion we don't have to vote on your resolutions. You're really willing to pass them yourself, but the board did take it up. It passed 2-0. I recused myself because I have a shellfish license and it could remotely affect me. So we made an application to the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection for state financial assistance for water pollution abatement projects. And I can't give you the details on that right now, but there's several. Obviously, we're looking for assistance on some of the water pollution abatement projects. We filled some vacancies. We filled the vacancy for a part-time chemist analysis in the Barnstable County Water Quality Laboratory. We filled the vacancy for a part-time buy fresh, buy local assistant position in the Cape Cod Cooperative Extension, and a vacancy for the youth educator position in the Cape Cod Cooperative Extension. All of these were recommended by the County Review Committee. Okay, we authorized an agreement from HUD to County Human Services the amount of $54,000 to address homelessness. This is part of our ongoing program in the Human Services Department to address the homeless population in Cape Cod. And we also had on the agenda the execution of an agreement to lease with the Cape Cod Organic Farm Incorporated for the county farm. But after some brief discussion between myself and Sabady and Ms. Flynn, we decided to delay that until county council had a chance to look at it. And in discussions with Jack, it looks like we may not even address it until after the first year. So there'll be no action right now on taking that lease. The original recommendation was for a 6-year extension to 2029. So that kind of jumped up at us, and we thought we would take a look at that. We then continued our relationship with the Center for Coastal Studies, and we awarded them an amount of $248,944 for a period of May 6, 2020 to May 15, 2021, extending the time of performance. This is a water quality monitoring program, and some of you who've been on the Assembly for a while remember this has been an ongoing program that we've been doing for quite a few years now. We also awarded 2 contracts. One was to ACD Environmental Services to conduct household hazardous waste and very small quantity generator collections through the county during calendar year 2021. This is the hazardous waste collections that they do monthly during the summer. Very good program. Right? I fill up my car with stuff and I bring it to them. Otherwise, it would wind up not from me, but from others in the waste stream. So we can avoid them. So that was for $300,000 is what that program cost us. We also awarded a contract to and executed the contract with GeoSyntech Consultants to provide analysis of municipal solid waste out-of-state disposal to support Cape Cod towns for an amount not to exceed $58,994 for a period November 12, 2020 to November 11, 2021. And let me read you the next one. This is authorizing the award of a contract to and execution of a contract with Tetra Tech to provide analysis of municipal solid waste diversion options for recyclable, reusable, and hard-to-dispose waste materials to support Cape Cod towns, the amount not to exceed $89,500. So what we're doing here is the tipping fees are going up and the cost of waste disposal is going up to all the towns on Cape Cod. The county is now looking into the alternatives. The first contract was to look at the cost and alternatives in out-of-state disposal of solid waste. And the second contract was to look, as I said, at diversion options for recyclable, reusable, and hard-to-dispose waste materials to support Cape Cod town. This will be a facility to try to recycle those materials or put them in, to deal with them here locally so that we don't have to ship them off. That pretty much covers it for last week's meeting. We come to this morning. Sean of the Health Department and Vera gave us a report on the number of cases on the Cape, which you can imagine are increasing. There were 69 cases. However, there is a delay in the reporting. So we report the 69 cases. We don't know if that's 1 day, 1 week. So we're still way below the state average, but we are increasing. There was only, I think, 11 people in the hospital and only 1 in intensive care, which is a report we got this morning. I brought up the neurovirus water testing. What I was trying was I was kind of confused. I was trying to understand the cyanobacteria testing that goes on in the freshwater ponds, and I find out that the county does indeed work with the Association for Preservation of Cape Cod in checking our freshwater ponds for these cyanobacteria. So I was given assurances there. A little confusing in the meeting, but I followed up with Sean on that. We do not test for neuroviruses in the salt water. It's a little more complicated. Okay, then we did an annual performance review evaluation of Christy Senatori, Executive Director of the Cape Cod Commission. She gave us an overview of quite an overview of what the commission has been doing, the various departments and the areas they look into, the economic areas and so on. It was all very positive, and the commissioners gave her our support in continuing on. We also had a discussion regarding fund accounting for the cleanup of the former Barnstable County Fire and Rescue Training Academy. I put that on the agenda because I wanted to know what our financial exposure is going forward. We seem to be in good shape in the commitments we've made next year and the year on and so forth. We have an agreement with the town of Barnstable, contract we signed with them. I was told by Steve Tebow, Assistant County Administrator, that we would know in a year probably a good handle on exactly what our financial obligations will be in the future, looking 5 years down the road, 6 years down the road. So hopefully we can get a handle on that. I had a brief discussion with Elizabeth, our finance director, about putting in some more money into a fund to deal with possible financial exposure. They were ongoing. It looks like there's the cleanup, but it also looks like once we understand what our obligations are, there will be ongoing mitigation year after year, public systems, and that'll be what we'll have to finance from county funds. And there's also other partners here, the airport and the industrial park. So hopefully we'll get in a year, we'll know exactly what.
Excuse me, Ron, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Commissioner Bergstrom. You seem to be breaking up a little bit. There was a point where you broke up a little bit when you spoke about the hazardous waste collection, and you mentioned the out of state, and then there was a sentence I missed there. And then also when you mentioned the corona virus at the Cape Cod Hospital with 11 people in there, you had mentioned something after that, and it kind of broke out.
Oh, I said it was only one person in ICU.
One in
That would be
ICU.
11.
Okay. I'm sorry.
And the contracts there are two contracts with consultants to look into alternatives for solid waste disposal. One is going to look into off-Cape disposal and the cost of that and what our alternatives are. The other one is to look at processing solid waste and separating recyclables and other materials that in an on-Cape facility. So hopefully they will give us a report in a year, and we'll be able to go out to the towns and tell them what their options are, so that we're not going to wind up paying an exorbitant fee for our solid waste. You know, the facility, I think in Rochester, is closing. Somewhere is closing. We'll be stuck with that. Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Sort
Okay.
of. Anyone else, some parts get a little in and out, but I don't know if anyone else is hearing that same thing, but
Well,
please carry on. I'm sorry.
Carry on regardless. Okay, so once again, okay, we had that discussion. Then we had a fiscal year 2020 budget message and development outlines. We decided to put that off until next week. I'm reviewing the budget message. Mr. Beatty didn't have it in front of him, and decided that it was very important, so we wanted to go over it again. And this will be the initial budget message we'll present to the staff when they make their requests for the fiscal 2020 budget. We then had, under Commissioner's actions, we authorized the filling of a vacancy for the SHINE program, and Albert gave us a little background in that program. It's a very, very valuable program. I think they had close to 7,000 people they interacted with last year who on gauging their healthcare needs as far as insurance goes. We once again had on our agenda the lease agreement with Cape Cod Organic Farms, and we basically established that we were not going to deal with it until probably after the first of the year. We are now going to receive $300,000 of an earmark Commonwealth of Massachusetts to the Barnstable County Health and Environmental Department for the purposes of establishing COVID-19 testing opportunities in the town of Falmouth, with testing available to all regardless of residence. So they're going to contribute $300,000 toward operating a testing facility. I guess it's a requirement, according to Sean, it's a requirement that be located in Falmouth, but it will be available to all people regardless of residence. The details on this have not been established. I talked to Sean a few hours ago. He said they have to work on exactly where they're going to do it, how they're going to staff it, and so on. But he said he's moving ahead with the utmost speed. I personally think it's important to have testing available for people, especially for employees of restaurants and so on, so they can be sure that they can stay open. So we are going to go ahead with that as quickly as we can, and I should have a report. They should come back to us next meeting with some more details on that. So I think I asked him, I said, we're going to wait for the 300,000. He said, no, we're going to go ahead. Then they'll compensate us later. We received $56,000, almost $57,000 from the Commonwealth to support the regional Buy Fresh Buy Local program. This is something that we get every year. At one point, they only gave us
Sorry,
15.
that's when you ducked out. 57,000 to support.
Buy Fresh Buy Local.
Okay.
Sorry about that. If you remember, those of you remember, we one budget cycle several years ago, we only got 15, but then they upped it to almost 60. So it's been a very good program. We have also received $146,000. Well, actually, we've added $45,000 to an original agreement with NOAA for advancing Southern New England shellfish agriculture through an engaged public and next generation decision support tools. If that sounds confusing, I asked Mike McGuire, and he said, yes, it is confusing, but it goes to several different aspects of what we do, what the extension program does for shellfish. Okay, and then we have received $1,133,000 to support the Woods Hole Sea Grant Marine Extension Program. Period. This is an amendment to an agreement. And it is to make technical changes, update total and available amounts, and add a COVID-19 related response to agricultural industry project. I think we already have the grant, so this is simply to make changes to the scope of the grant. That covers us for today. Any questions that I can answer?
Thank you, Commissioner Bergstrom. Are there any questions? I see Delegate Harder. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Ron, two things. One, just for our edification, I had an appointment at 11, but I got to see the beginning of the meeting, and Christie's presentation was terrific. And we may want her to, even though we don't give her a review, I thought it was a great PowerPoint on what they spent the last year doing. So it might be nice if she could give that to us on the assembly. And then the other question was about the water testing. I'm confused. There was an article in the Provincetown Independent about the algae blooms, and you're saying we do test, but not for norovirus. So I'm confused about what we do test the water for, if we're going to be able to help test the water for the algae blooms and work on that. So I'm confused about water. Thanks.
Well, I'm not surprised because I was confused about it too. I wanted to know, I knew that the Association with the Preservation of Cape Cod was looking into cyanobacteria, which occur in freshwater ponds. You know, the old people used to say, don't swim in the pond after July or something like that. That's cyanobacteria. So there is a testing regimen for that, and the county is helping in that. There is also viruses that occur in salt water, which we are not testing for. Very complicated. And I don't know that we have the ability to test for it. Usually we test when there are potential outbreaks. As far as the Center for Coastal Studies, they're dealing mostly with colorful bacteria and biological issues in the water. I don't want to go out of my expertise, but there's a lot of components to this. My concern with the health department was that we were cooperating on the cyanobacteria, and we are. And as far as the viruses goes, that's far more complicated. People have gotten sick from the shellfish. It's actually a human-produced problem. Maybe Doc can tell you more about it than I can. But that's something we have to do. And that's the best explanation I can give you right now.
Okay.
I would say, Ron, the only viral illness that we really have to worry about transmission by shellfish is hepatitis, and you don't routinely look for that. It's only in the hepatitis A in the case of an outbreak. So no, I mean all of our other common problems are all bacterial. The Vibrio is a bacterial.
Vibrio, yeah,
and that's bacterial. So the viral thing is not a big issue, and it is real complicated testing. I don't think our department does it.
No, I'm sure it doesn't.
Delegate Harder, thank you. And I'll pass on that possible agenda item for a future meeting to the speaker, okay? Delegate Green?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you, Mr. Bergstrom, for the report of so many of the meetings. I was curious, you sort of cut out a little bit when you were talking about the Buy Fresh, Buy Local program. It sounded like you've added $57,000 to that program. If so, is all that earmarked, or is
this is an extension? We get this every year. We've gotten in the past, it was as low as 15,000. We got maybe 5 or 6 years ago. John can tell you as much as I can. He was on the finance committee, but it was up to almost 60. So we get 56,000 from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of Agriculture to the Cape Cod Cooperative Extension to support regional Buy Fresh, Buy Local program marketing efforts, just for the fiscal year ending in June 30th.
okay? And
So next year we'll hopefully get another 56,000.
yeah, I was thinking if there's any movement forward with the shellfishers in Barnstable County, where they were able to somehow sell direct to consumers, if any of this money was not earmarked, with the NOAA, you said something about shellfish, that you said 147,000, and the Buy Fresh, Buy Local, if there was any money to, to help them. But is
there was some money put aside to the cooperative extension. Let me get into it now here.
But
there was money. Cooperative Extension got 1.133 million to support the Woods Hole Sea Grant Marine Extension Program. Now they want to update total and available amounts and add a COVID-19 related response to aquaculture industry projects. Now I asked Mike, I know he's not with us, but exactly how that money would translate into helping the shellfish industry, and he gave me an explanation, but it was rather complicated. But they're making accommodations within this program to try to help shellfishermen around the Cape, but I can't tell you exactly how they're going to do that.
thank you, I appreciate that. Maybe we could have an update from Mike at some point too. Thank you.
Okay. We're all happy?
Any other questions? I don't see any, excuse me, let's move on. The next matter of business is communications and a presentation from the Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries Senior Fisheries Scientist, Dr. Gregory Scommel, regarding updates on the shark activity here on Cape Cod. And Dr. Scommel, thank you very much for joining us today and giving us an update on this important issue to our region.
I saw him on before.
I did too.
I think there's no second page.
Well, we could come back to that matter in a moment. Are there any communications from any public officials? I don't see anyone on the Zoom, but hearing none. Communications from members of the public. Here's a day where you'd like us some communications from the members of the public.
Yes, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I just sent him a quick email. I don't know why he was here and then, he wants
there he
to
is.
be admitted. All set. I just admitted him.
Okay.
He'll be back.
Dr. Gregory Scommel?
Yep, he's there. Asked to,
Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me?
yes.
Yes.
I don't know what happened. I was on at 4:15, and then when you tried to connect to me, my whole browser melted down, and I've been working on my computer since to get it going again. I'm really sorry about that.
You were right on time. Don't worry. Thank you very much for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. Is this still a good time, or do you want to
Yes.
reschedule?
No, we were just on your agenda item for your communications, and we really appreciate it. Thank you. Go right ahead, please.
Oh, no problem. I was gonna, share my screen and give a PowerPoint if that works.
Definitely. Have you, is Ian all linked up with you? Go right ahead with it.
Yeah, I will, and it'll probably go about a half hour. Is that okay?
This is yeah, of course it is. This is an important topic to most delegates here. So thank you. Go right ahead.
Okay, thanks. Let me see if I can get this going.
There you go.
Okay, can everyone see that?
It's black.
I mean, it says you have started screen sharing.
Oh, that's not great. I can see it. But nobody else can.
You are viewing Greg Scommel's screen. View options.
You might have shared the wrong window, possibly.
I'm looking at my presentation. Let me.
There also might be a problem, Greg, if you're on the browser version of Zoom instead of the downloaded app. I don't know if that's what you did.
That's probably what I did. What a day I'm having.
I don't know. We might want to take a couple minutes and just have you. Oh, there we
Here
go.
it is.
Oh,
How's that?
great.
Perfect.
Okay.
All right.
I'll try to get through this. There's a lot of data I want to show you folks, and it starts with the objectives of what we're currently working on and what's going on, and I want to share as much information as possible with you. So, assuming I can, yes. So we're all aware of the presence of a growing seal population on Cape Cod that is throughout all of New England and into Canada. So there's a single population. I'm going to refer specifically to gray seals that occurs in the northwestern Atlantic Ocean. It's been protected for 46 years, and as a result, it's responding to population recovery and recolonizing parts of New England and Canada that it previously occurred in. And as a result, we now have something along the lines of about 500,000 seals in the northwestern Atlantic. with tens of thousands occurring off Cape Cod. And as a result, we have drawn the attention of the number one seal predator in the Atlantic Ocean, and that is white sharks. And white sharks are coming to Cape Cod on a seasonal basis now to hunt seals. This is what white sharks do. They're predators very well adapted for attacking, killing, and feeding on seals. And a robust seal population means that you're going to draw white sharks if those seals are here predictably each year, and they are. So as a result, white sharks are not only coming to New England in greater numbers, but they're coming closer to shore, and they're hunting in very shallow water. And as a result, we get these kinds of photos that are taken, which shows overlap with existing human activities and a growing white shark population in our coastal waters. And as a result, we've had some negative interactions over the last several years that have increased. Our last fatal shark attack prior to 2018 was in 1936 in Buzzards Bay off the coast of Mattapoisett. However, since then, over the course of the last 8 years, we've had a number of incidents, one that involved a swimmer off Truro, another that involved 2 kayakers off Plymouth in 2014, a paddleboarder whose paddleboard was bitten in 2017 off Wellfleet, another Truro swimmer in 2018 that was bitten, and then a fatal attack that occurred in September of 2018 on a boogie boarder in shallow water. So as a result, the growing presence of white sharks has resulted in overlap with human activities and a handful of negative interactions or shark attacks or bites, whatever you want to call them. However, it is still a relatively rare phenomenon, given the number of people we have going in the water, the number of activities that are still going on, and the number of white sharks that we're seeing out there. So as a result of these interactions, a lot of our focus as marine biologists studying white sharks has kind of shifted away from some of the broad scale aspects of natural history and movements to fine scale patterns that'll help us produce information that'll be useful for beach managers and public safety officials. So we developed a research plan that we started in 2019, building on the research we had done for 9 years prior to that, to get a sense of white shark feeding behavior. We believe that if we knew very effectively where, when, and how white sharks feed on their natural prey, which are gray seals, we'd be able to identify those areas or those times when people might be more at risk. You know, white sharks are in these shallow areas to feed on the seals. They're not here to bite people. If they were here to bite people, we'd have a lot more bites, and thankfully we do not. And so what we're doing is we're observing the behavior of white sharks directly, but also indirectly using a variety of technological advancements in tagging technology. And so we're looking for predictable patterns. And if we can find patterns in behavior, if there's some particular time of day, or if there's some particular location that they're drawn to, or conditions that they're drawn to, a lunar cycle, a tide, you name it, then we can use those patterns and to find predictability and be able to forecast where those areas around Cape Cod where people might be more vulnerable to potential attacks by white sharks. We hope to do this in order to enhance public safety. So we embarked on this study in 2019, and again, using data we had already been collecting over the years. And the methods we're using really do center on tagging technologies. And I'm going to go through each of these as we get through the talk. So you'll learn about acoustic telemetry and acoustic tags, and then data logging camera tags and aerial cameras, all of which we're using to study fine scale behavior of white sharks and answer some of the most basic questions, as well as some of the more complex questions at what triggers an attack in a white shark. And so many of you have seen our tagging technique, I'm sure. We do not chum for sharks. We do not capture them. bait them or handle them in any way. Our goal when we're tagging is to be as minimally intrusive as possible. Because the one thing a scientist does not want to do is to alter the behavior of the shark, particularly in close proximity to where people are recreating along our beaches. And so we use a spotter plane to locate the sharks. We use a long pulpit on the bow of our tagging vessel to place a tag using a small intramuscular dart right at the base of the dorsal fin while the shark is swimming, free swimming. In other words, we're not capturing it. We're not dumping all kinds of chum into the water, which are techniques used in other areas. We think that chumming close to swimming beaches is not a really good idea. And so what I want to show you, let me see if I can get to this video. Maybe I could show you a video of our tagging technique. Hopefully it shows and it plays. We'll see. Keep me posted, those of you who might or might not be seeing this. Can you see that at all?
We can hear it.
You can hear it, but you can't see it.
But we
Yeah,
can't.
I don't think videos like that are going to show through the screen
Yeah.
share in Zoom,
Okay.
unfortunately.
All right. I'm sorry about that. Well, we will go back to the talk, and I've had good luck with Zoom all season, but that doesn't do us any good, does it? Today. Suddenly today I'm not having as much luck. Okay, you back to the slides, you guys?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm just kind of throwing together a slide on a data. Oh boy. For those who can still hear that, I apologize. That's the video playing out.
That'll work. All right.
I don't know how to turn that off. So over the course of the last 10 years, actually, we've done over 200 vessel tagging trips. We've sighted over 5,000 white sharks, but I really want to point out there that doesn't mean individuals. That means sharks that we're seeing multiple times. What I want you to look at is the graphic on the right. These are all the locations that we have seen white sharks. So when you think in terms of where these animals are occurring, certainly the Outer Cape is important habitat for them, but there's no particular spot along the Outer Cape where they are not found. There's plenty of them all along that Outer Cape. And with our recent expansion into Cape Cod Bay in 2019, those two locations is where we've been tagging and spotting sharks in Cape Cod Bay. But a lot of this is dependent on our efforts. So some of the data I'll show you in a few slides are effort independent, and you can get a sense of where the sharks occur in Massachusetts waters over a broader scale. We've also conducted over 70 aerial surveys for white sharks, and we've tagged over 200 using a variety of technologies. And I've listed those technologies. We'll go into some of them. Don't get too carried away. I'm going to focus on the acoustic tags. I'll talk a little bit about pop-up satellite tags, and also talk about the ADLs, which are the acceleration data loggers, which is a new tool we're using to really look at the fine scale behavior. And as I said, the acoustic tag is one I really like because it gives us a sense of fine scale local movements of these sharks. Where do they spend their time? You know, when do they arrive? When do they leave? And the way this tag works is it's a transmitter that emits a very high frequency sound. Okay, that sound is picked up by an array of acoustic receivers that we put out throughout Massachusetts coastal waters, working with local towns, the Park Service, and others to get these receivers out there. We've got over 100 receivers throughout Massachusetts to get a sense of the seasonality and the timing and the residency of white sharks around our coastal areas. Anytime the shark swims within the range of one of these receivers, the transmitter is detected, and then that information is logged. Not only the date and the time, but which individual white shark was actually detected. So we can track individuals throughout Massachusetts and also individuals from year to year to year. The beauty of these tags is they'll last up to 8 or 9 years. So as long as they stay on the shark, we can follow the individual movement patterns of these animals year after year after year. And that's a real advantage to using this technology. Not only getting the fine scale movements, but knowing who's doing what and whether that's changing over time. And so what I have here in this map is all the locations of our acoustic receivers. The little white circles with the black centers are the standard acoustic receivers. These are the ones we place out, and we have to collect at the end of the year to get the data from them, okay? So they do not transmit data in real time. However, the stars, the yellow stars you see is the new technology we're deploying this year that are real-time live receivers. Anytime a shark that is tagged swims in the range of one of those starred locations, lifeguards on the beach or public safety officials in that town and others will receive a notification within seconds. So a lifeguard will know, wow, a tagged white shark just swam within 500 yards of the swimming area here. Those live receivers are also integrated with the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy's Sharktivity app. So anyone can also be checking whether any tagged white sharks are in the area. Now the key is these are only tagged sharks. And as good as I think I might be, I haven't tagged them all. So just because there's no detection coming in doesn't mean there's no shark there. It could be an untagged shark, but it's a great tool for public safety officials to get notifications in a sense of how frequently sharks are in the area. The other thing I want to point out in this graphic are those red squares. Those are what we call fine scale arrays. I'm going to touch on that a little bit near the end of my talk. Those fine scale arrays are being set up by the Center for Coastal Studies, who I'm working with. And those are really intensive arrays. Those are the receivers. Those are little white dots put really close together in groups of 20 or 30. So we can triangulate the exact positions of the sharks as they swim close to the shoreline. And that's for us to get a sense of the really fine scale movement of the animals as it relates to the oceanography, hydrography of the area. So in other words, if there's a sandbar, then a trough, then another sandbar, these tags, as these sharks, as they move through, will be able to recreate their movements and see how they're interacting with their environment and how they may be getting close to shore. Remember, the sharks are trying to come as close as possible to feed on the seals because the seals are hanging out tight to the beach, knowing that the sharks are there trying to eat them. So it's a classic predator-prey relationship going out, unfolding right in our very, very shallow coastal areas where we're recreating, and that's where the problems occur. And so I'm going to touch on each of these technologies a little bit, and I'll do it in the context of answering some of the most basic questions that we have and you have. So when are the sharks here? So if we plot all our acoustic data over time, we can see that the month of June is when the sharks, for the most part, begin to arrive, but don't really ramp up until we get into late July. And the peak months being August, September, and October. And then as water temperatures cool and we start to get these colder days and these nor'easters in November, the sharks will scatter and begin to leave and move south. And by mid-December, a handful of individuals who are hanging around, hardy souls, they take off as well. So there's a very distinct seasonality that we can pull from our acoustic detection data. That's basically taking all the data from all our receivers and just simply plotting it over time and getting this very clear graphic that gives us a sense of the seasonality and what those peak months are. And of course they coincide with some of our busiest summer months here on Cape Cod, as well as those months that people don't anticipate that things are going on, like when the kids go back to school or used to go back to school in September. We would still have plenty of sharks around as it extends well into October as well. And even November can be very productive. 10 days ago, I got off the water, and 10 days ago, those really beautiful weekend we had in November that we all long for, we tagged 13 sharks in 3 days. And that's because the water temperature was still hovering around 50 degrees, It's not until it dips below 47, 48 degrees that those sharks will actually get out of here. Where do they spend their time when they're here? So now we can just simply plot all of our acoustic receivers, which were those little white dots in those previous map and in this current map, and then plot out the number of detections proportional to the size of the circle. And so when we take all of our detections of 200 plus sharks over the last 7 or 8 years, and we plot them against the location of receiver, we can see that, yeah, there are some white sharks detected along the South Shore, extremely, very, very few, but the bulk of our detections are along the outer Cape, which really reflects where we've seen them and where we've been tagging them as well. You know, you'll see the eastern side of Cape Cod Bay is an area that is also frequented by the white sharks, but it's really that outer Cape from Provincetown all the way down to Monomoy where the sharks are spending their time. And this next graphic is an animation, which I hope plays. But what it'll show is the sharks actually filtering in over time over the course of the season. So what we're looking at here is early July, and there's a date up at the top left-hand corner of this graphic. And you'll see that the numbers are beginning to grow, and this is all from detection data. You know, the number of detections on each of those receivers. As we get into those peak months of August and September, you can see those bubbles are really big. You'll see little spurts of activity along the South Shore from Boston to Plymouth, but the bulk of that activity, eastern side of Cape Cod Bay, and again, the outer Cape. Now we're into October. You know, there's a few sharks that are leaving, but these pulses of activity, storm events will push the sharks out, but they'll come back in. And now we're into late November and early December, and the sharks are gone. So that pulse of activity, that seasonality of the sharks moving in to take advantage of seals in those areas where the seals are, and that's primarily along the outer Cape. We also looked at some short-term archival tagging data, and these are these pop-up satellite tags that record depth and temperature information from the sharks and then come off and report back to us through a satellite. These are different from the acoustic transmitters. And so these are the tracks of 8 individual sharks, and all they show is the depth of those sharks, color-coded by temperature. So the brighter the color, the warmer the water, and the deeper each one of those goes, the greater depths those sharks are going in. And what we did when we modeled this data set is, yes, the sharks do go into very shallow water and then sometimes migrate out into waters as deep as 75 or 80 meters, but they always come back in. And on average, they spend about 40%, over almost 50% of their time in water that is less than 15 feet deep. Okay, so that's a high proportion of time in regions or in areas that overlap with human activities. So it's a very useful statistic to share with public safety officials that, yes, the sharks are in this shallow water. Realize they're in this shallow water on average about half the time. And so the potential for these interactions with people, of course, is going up because of that high proportion of time in that shallow water. And I think some of the towns that we work with are surprised by that statistic. But it takes these kinds of tagging data in order to generate those kinds of model outputs. And I mentioned those starred receivers, those little stars that we put out this past summer in 2020. Those are the live receivers, and these are the ones that detect sharks and transmit it to public safety officials. And of course, your question is going to be, well, why aren't they all live receivers? And that's because of money, right? The cost of a standard receiver is about $2,000. The cost of one of these live receivers is about $15,000. So I got funding through the legislature and the secretary's office to buy 6 of these with some help from the Office of Naval Research. And we deployed them in Truro and Wellfleet and Orleans and Chatham. We had really excellent results in terms of the way they communicated quite well with the public safety officials. And I think some of the towns, in particular Wellfleet, really liked using this and actually used it as an educational tool for beachgoers. Not only would they get this information in real time, but I'd also share with them the list of the sharks that are tagged. So when they pull some people out of the water, people might come up to them and they share the information on, was that a male? It was an adult male. It's 14 feet long. It was tagged back in 2012. That's an educational tool, and a lot of the lifeguards like using that. So I'd like to expand our use of live receivers, but that'll be contingent on funding, of course. And of course, the big question, so we know where they spend their time. We know when they're here. Now, how do they go about hunting seals? What triggers an attack on a seal? And therefore, what might trigger an attack on a human being? And that's really hard to study, because those kinds of events happen over really, really fine scales, over short periods of time. What we've learned, for example, from watching sharks, either from our spotter pilot or from aerial technology, attack seals, is it happens very, very, very quickly. So this particular shark chased the seal into shallow water, but the seal got away because the shark can only go so shallow. This particular shark won the battle. This seal wandered out too far from the beach and was attacked and killed. What happens is the shark will consume the seal fairly quickly or pull the seal offshore. So this can happen over the matter of minutes. So as much as I'd like to say I can learn a lot from observing sharks attack seals, probably in the last 10 years, I've only seen it happen less than 20 times. And we record when, where, and how that event happens. And almost certainly it's in very shallow water during the daytime, because we're not out there at night. We can't see anything at night. And so studying what happens at night is really important to us. So for that, we use indirect tools to study these fish. And this is where we get to our very fine scale acoustic receiver arrays that we're working with the Center for Coastal Studies on. These are those two little red boxes I showed you in that initial graphic. One of these arrays is at Head of the Meadow in Truro, the other's at Nauset Beach in Orleans. And so if you look at each of these figures, the one on the left, each one of those dots represents one of those acoustic receivers. These are the standard $2,000 acoustic receivers. We put them very, very close together. They cover about a mile of the shoreline. And anytime a shark swims within the range of the array, it's picked up by multiple receivers, which allows us to triangulate the exact position of that shark and how it's entering this coastal area. So what are they doing when they approach the shoreline? Are they using troughs between sandbars? Are they coming up on sandbars? Are they hunting the backside of sandbars? And we did the same thing this year off Nauset Beach in Orleans. And here you can see on the right side of the screen, the 20 or so receivers we set up in that area. And then what Brian Laguerre at the Center for Coastal Studies is doing is mapping these areas using a variety of tools to get a sense of the bathymetry. What are the depths in this area? What are the currents, using various instrumentation? How big are the tides? And how is the behavior of the sharks affected by these oceanographic conditions? The more data we collect relative to the movements of these animals, the better equipped we are to model where they're most likely to be at certain times of the day in certain areas. And so the next graphic I'm going to show you, these receiver arrays were set up this year. Last year, we put one out off Head of the Meadow as a test to see if we can do it successfully and triangulate the positions of these sharks. These are the paths of 31 sharks over what amounted to about a 3-week period off Head of the Meadow Beach. You can see 31 sharks came through in that very short period of time. And you can see the actual movements that these sharks made. And if you plot these relative to the bathymetry of the area, and I hope this graphic plays, this shows the movement of one of these sharks relative to the sandbar system that occurs there. And you can see what the shark is doing is hunting the deep water on the backside of that sandbar. And for those of you familiar with Head of the Meadow, you know there's a fairly sizable seal haul out right in that area. So these sharks are parking themselves in this area waiting for seals to come out over the crest of those sandbars and just hunting in that area. This is all just strict predatory behavior. So immediately what you think is, okay, what's useful information for public safety officials here? You know, you probably don't want to be on the other side of that sandbar when these sharks are in that area. And given the fact that 31 individuals used that area, there's a high probability there's a shark hunting in that specific spot any given day or multiple times through the day. So anytime then you see these sandbar systems that set up along the outer cape, we can assume, again, using these results, that these kinds of things are happening. A great example of how the data we're collecting is looking at these very fine scale movements relative to the environment in that area. So Brian just hauled his 2 receivers arrays from this year. They were out for 3 months, and he has tracks from over 1,000 sharks. So he has 1,000 shark tracks from those 2 arrays, just to give you a sense of how much these sharks are using these areas. And you say to yourself, why? I mean, it's a very dynamic area. It's very challenging for these sharks because there's a huge energetic payoff. When a shark eats a seal, there are estimates that range from 2 weeks to 2 months that say that those sharks don't have to feed again. So it's a huge energetic payoff for sharks to feed on seals, and that's why they do it. Just a few more slides here to show about some of the other technologies that we're using. We partnered with Discovery Channel last year to help us fund the development of tags that record acceleration, velocity, and very, very fine scale movements every second. So we're not looking at what they're doing on a weekly basis or a daily basis. We're looking at what these sharks are doing on a minute by minute or second by second basis. And these are called acceleration data loggers. And coupled with these data loggers are camera systems built in. And so what you see on this particular shark is one of these towed cameras with acceleration data logging sensors in it, tethered to the shark to one of my acoustic tags, which will stay on the shark, but the tether will break down and the camera system will pop up. And so what this allows us to do is deploy these tags for 2 or 3 days on individual sharks to look at their really fine scale, high resolution behavior over the course of those 2 days. And to try to get a sense of how frequently are the sharks just cruising? Are they resting? Are they hunting? Are they attempting to feed? When is that happening? When are they attempting to feed? How often does that happen? How often are they successful in feeding? And we can plot those data against the actual observations from the camera system. So I'm just going to give you an example of some of the data from the tag. And this is acceleration data. And so what I want you to see here is when the shark is tagged, this particular shark, as any shark that we tag typically does, we're placing a small dart and we're spooking the shark and we're startling it. So here you can see in 3 different dimensions, X, Y, and Z, forward, sideways, and up, the shark accelerates dramatically. So the normal swimming pattern and then an acceleration. The shark then settles into a very casual, relaxed swimming pattern. What intrigues us after we got the tag back are these spikes in acceleration. And when we look at those spikes in acceleration, we see that the shark is actively attempting to attack and kill a seal. So it gives us a frequency at which the shark is attempting to feed in shallow water, and we can correlate this with depth. And this upper graphic shows that the shark in both these instances moved from about 12 meters deep up to about 4 meters deep, very, very rapidly. That's an attempted predatory strike on a seal. So we look at the frequency with which these events are happening, and we can look at the camera video to validate what's actually happening and to see if they actually succeed at feeding on seals. We're generating population estimates right now for white sharks. It's not done yet. When that's done, we'll be able to then look at how many white sharks, how many seals does a white shark feed on over the course of the summer successfully, and ultimately how many seals does the white shark population take over the course of a season. And will that lead to a diminishing seal population? So these are the kinds of questions we're trying to answer. When are these strikes happening? How are they happening? How does it relate to human activities? Is there information coming from that that will be useful for advising people? On top of that, we're using fixed station aerial systems. So this is a balloon. It's basically a small blimp that we put up, and this is off of Nauset Beach, to observe shark and seal behavior close to shore. So to get those direct observations. And the camera system is wonderful. It records for multiple hours, and we're able to zoom in on events that might be happening. And it also is a potential public safety tool. So we're testing the feasibility and the efficacy of using that as a tool for early detection of white sharks in shallow waters. So by putting together all these observations, and this is kind of just a diagram by coupling, environmental conditions that we can get from real-time satellite data here in the middle to what we've identified as being important environmental conditions driving the behavior of sharks, we're hoping to produce these probability maps, which you see on the right side here. This is a heat map. The hotter the color, the more likely a white shark is going to be there. If we can produce these on an automated basis on a daily, we can share that information with public safety officials and the public so that they can, assess their own risk based on the activity patterns and what they want to do in the water that day. We're still advising folks, don't go in over your waist in the absence of better information. Well, this is that better information that we're trying to generate, so that we can, start to pinpoint those areas or those times where people might be more at risk. And it takes this kind of data collection in order to generate that. And it takes a lot of data modeling as well. But we've got a couple of postdocs on board doing that. And we're trying to crunch this information as quickly as possible because let's face it, there are certain groups out there that want it sooner than later. And so we're trying to fast track this as much as possible. So that's our ultimate goal. And that was everything we're doing in a nutshell as quickly as I could possibly get it to you folks without boring you to death. But I'll gladly accept any questions you've got and willing to, and I'm certainly happy to elaborate on any aspect of this. And I've left out some of our other aspects we're studying because I wanted to focus on public safety, which is exactly what we're doing right now. So I appreciate your time.
We appreciate your time too, Dr. Scommel, and all that you're doing to help us here, sort of mitigate this issue and also give the public some reassurance that folks like you and others are on top of it.
Thank you.
Delegate O'Malley, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Scommel. I'm the delegate from Provincetown, and there's a question that really comes to the surface here all the time, and it is that although clearly there's a tremendous shark presence off the back shore, they almost don't seem to come around Race Point and into the bay. You have a detector out at Herring Cove, very few there, and then once you come around the tip at Long Point and the bay from Truro and Provincetown, there are none. Do you have any thoughts on why this particular area does not attract them?
Yeah, it's a great question, Delegate. It's we're hoping with everything we're collecting, there'll be some model output that will tell us, well, that makes a lot of sense. Right now, it's all hypothetical on our part. We know that the Cape Cod Bay shallows up extensively, and these sharks, while they can navigate in shallow water to some extent, they're very vulnerable to beaching when you get some of the really shoaly areas. And it really has a lot to do with seal densities as well. There are parts we did put a receiver within Provincetown Harbor this year because there's a growing seal presence within the harbor.
There is.
And so we're very much interested in that. We know that Wellfleet Bay has gotten several of our white sharks within the bay. And even though there's not a sizable presence of seals within the bay, I think Wellfleet Bay almost acts as a natural fish trap. And sharks that are just traversing the shoreline, and they seem to do that. They seem to be more transient when they enter the bay. as opposed to resident on the outer Cape. So they'll come around the point and we've had sharks that are detected on the outer Cape go up to the state of Maine coastline and back again in a matter of 2 or 3 days. And when they do this, they seem to traverse along the shoreline, all the way up past Boston, go up to Maine, and then come around and come back again. What drives that? I have no idea. And so one of the other confusing aspects of this that creates a lot of variance in our models is that individuals behave very, very differently. You know, I don't know about you, but when I think about fish, I tend to think about species patterns. Striped bass, codfish. We tend to generalize because those are animals that kind of all do the same thing. With white sharks, there's so much individual, what we call intraspecific variability, that it makes it really hard to predict what the species is going to do. For example, we found that one particular white shark will come into shallow water only at night, whereas another one will be there only during the day. And that's really hard to model because that means they're there all the time, right? And so that individual variability has become a major challenge for us to overcome. It's really fascinating. And it's maybe something that top predators all over the world do, and it seems to be. But in the case of white sharks or ocean animals, it's really among the higher animals like marine mammals where we see that, not with fish. So you have a great question. And we're going to continue to monitor it, and I'm hoping that some aspect of what we're studying will point to what the big difference is between what's happening in the bay and on the outer Cape. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Chafee?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Dr. Scomo, thank you so much for being here with us today. You have a gift not only for conducting research, but being able to translate it in terms that the public and policymakers can understand it, grasp it, and make use of it. So thank you so much. I have several questions for you. First, I'm an avid user of Sharktivity, as I used to be a very enthusiastic open water swimmer on the Cape. The data that you showed appeared a little bit different. Is it the same data? Is that your data that's going into Sharktivity?
Yeah, Sharktivity not only gets our data, but also gets data and reports from the general public and others, fishermen and such. But integrating our data set with Sharktivity has taken some time just because of the platforms and the way our data come in. And so the real-time information, Delegate, is coming in now and should be very, very similar. But some of the more archived data sets may not be up to speed on Sharktivity yet. So you bring up a good point. It's something we're trying to resolve.
Thank you. That's very helpful to know. And since I'm the delegate from the town of Brewster, I noticed that there seemed to be a cluster of sightings near Brewster. Do you have any idea why that would be? Yeah, so you're right, and that's a 2019 cluster. One of the issues that scientists always have is you're limited by the spatial extent to what you're sampling, right? If you only sample the outer Cape, then everything you collect will only be on the outer Cape. And so we had that problem, and we decided in 2019 to expand our tagging efforts into the bay to find out what's going on inside the bay, get a better handle on the bay. And what we found is that there were only primarily 2 areas where our spotter pilot was finding white sharks and where we were tagging them. And that was the Brewster Flats, in addition to Billingsgate Shoal. Now, I don't know whether that's because of water clarity or water depth. My pilot does not believe it is. We think they're drawn to these areas to feed primarily on striped bass and other species of fish that are aggregating in those zones. We were hoping to get out into the bay this year. The pandemic kind of threw a wrench into that, and we didn't get into the bay except once.
but we do want to continue our work in the Bay. But it's a great question, and as you can see from our receiver coverage, we've really wired up the Bay more effectively than we used to. So those data will come in over the course. We'll probably pull those receivers in January, and then I share them with each of the towns, usually by late January.
Thank you. And did you mention what your plan is as far as how many more sharks you plan to tag in the next couple of years?
Well, honestly, I'd love to tag them all because we learned so much from each of these. This year, and I didn't update the talk with this year's data yet because I really just got off the water, but we tagged 38 sharks with acoustic tags. We tagged 8 with those acceleration data logging camera tags, and we had those 2 arrays out there. So I think it was a semi-successful year. To answer your question, I want to continue to do this behavioral research so we can adequately provide significant sample sizes to our models for the next 3 years. So that means tagging as many as I possibly can over the next 3 years. And if towns start to come online with using more and more of these live receivers, then I'm prone to keep tagging because the tags stay in for a long time, and they're very useful in terms of notifying the town of the presence of these animals.
Thank you. And my final question is, based on what your vision for what you would like to do in the next few years, how sufficient is your current funding to achieve that?
We've been very fortunate with the establishment and formation of the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy, which funds virtually all of our research. I work for the State Division of Marine Fisheries, so I have a hard salary, which is great. We don't have to raise money for that. The Conservancy has hired a scientist. We're bringing on a postdoc. We have a couple of incoming grants, and several legislators, including Sarah Peak and Julian Sear, have been instrumental in providing us state funding over the last year. So right now we're sitting really, really well poised, I think, for the next year. But you know how it goes. From year to year, we see what's going to happen. But right now, we're in a very good position, and I appreciate the question.
Thank you very much.
Delegate Oman?
John, you're muted.
Okay, thanks, Greg, for this very informative presentation. I have a lot of experience at Nauset Beach. I ran a restaurant there for almost 30 years, so I know the shark situation there pretty well. But I was thinking more about the Bay. The sport fishing community in the Bay has reported to me, and it's pretty, from all three, from Rock Harbor, Wississuit, and Barnstable Harbor, that there are a lot of juvenile sharks out there that probably aren't detected, and they use spotters planes as well. And they're telling me that they've seen as many as 100 sharks a day out in the Bay, but they're juveniles, and they attack the fishing community too while they're reeling them in. So you don't have any ability to tag the more juvenile sharks, the smaller sharks, because it seems like that's another very big community that seems to be somewhat overlooked. I know that we talked a little bit about how they didn't go around the side of P-Town, but I think there's a lot of them in there. I don't know how they get there, but every indication I get from the sport fishing communities, they're there, and they're in abundance. Could you address that?
Yeah, you bring up a great point, and that's what really was that really prompted us to move into the Bay. It was the reports we were getting from the charter captains and others, private boat fishermen, with their catches being picked off by the smaller sharks. So when we got out there in 2019, the sharks we did tag were all on average smaller than what we're used to seeing on the Outer Cape. And what happens in the life history of a white shark is these younger animals, and which are all typically less than, up to about 10 feet long, are almost exclusively feeding on fish. They haven't gone through puberty, so to speak. And so they're not big and bulky and strong, and they don't even have the right tooth structure to attack and kill a seal. And so they're really focused on fish species. And that's exactly what they're doing in Billingsgate, Brewster Flats. And we did get some tags out in some of those smaller ones. And we've toyed around with the idea of actively capturing these fish, which is a process. It can be done. And we've used some of these charter captains to do that. Right now, we're trying to be as much hands off as we can, just because it's, doing anything with these fish and really close to beaches, I think could be problematic in terms of altering the behavior of the sharks. But we are trying to focus more on Cape Cod Bay, on these younger fish. They do show up on the outer Cape as well, but they don't stay long. And when we approach them, they take off very quickly because they're obviously frightened of the larger sharks, which will attack and kill them. And one thing I will point to too is that there seems to be a dominance hierarchy that's forming as well on the outer Cape with some of these bigger sharks. When we look at these individual patterns of behavior, it's almost like there's territoriality that's setting up, and there's dominant sharks in those areas, and those younger sharks can't compete. So they move out and around into the bay, which is warm, shallow, and loaded with fish. But I appreciate the question, and I also appreciate for many of you who represent the Cape, don't hesitate to reach out to me or put people in touch with me directly. I put my cell phone out there, and because I want to get reports. And as a fisheries biologist, most of what I've learned is the importance of working with fishermen. And the locals. So it's something I strive to do, and it's really important to me because I learn a lot I'm not out there every day, and I learn a lot from people when they give me reports.
Delegate Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Dr. Scomo, very much for your presentation. First of all, is it possible for you to forward to us your slides? I mean, it would be really helpful for us to really look at it. I would appreciate it. And I am the delegate from Wellfleet, so I have a lot of questions, as you might imagine. I think a lot of what you presented answered a lot of the questions I had. And I'm very glad that you focused on this human safety as a result of your research. And the people in my community, as you well know, are very interested in these research buoys. They do alarm for the human safety when the lifeguards are there and the lifeguards get called. But when the hours they're not there, our beaches, we do not have internet connectivity or cell connectivity. So the apps really are not useful for us. But I do understand that you, given the amount of hours that the guards can be there and the time of year versus the sharks, there's a lot of time when there are people out there and there's no connectivity. So I do understand that you can somehow make these buoys trigger a light when there's when the sharks come close that are tagged. And if you can do that, that would be really, really helpful so that after hours or before hours or after the season or before the season where the guards are there, then the people on the beach and in the water would have a warning. So my first question is, can you do that? And if you can do that, can you do it soon? And then the next question would be, would you be willing to, you said that right now the buoys are in the middle of the beach, but that you want to make more use of the buoys. I mean, would you support putting buoys on either ends of the beaches since the sharks travel north and south, so that there would be more of a warning system where people would on the beach would have the warning that they're coming from one area to another? And then the third question in that series would be, how many times were the alarms triggered when the shark was on the ocean side of the buoy, as opposed to the other side? So those are three cluster questions.
Yeah, thank you, Delegate. I hope I remember them all. I'll start with the light on the buoy. That seems to be thrown around quite a bit by individuals. If I had the capacity to do that, I would have. That's not something. I think it's important to emphasize that, and I try to do this with all the groups that I speak to. Is we're in the beta testing mode with these real-time receivers, and they're basically brand new. Last year, I worked with a company out of Germany. They produced some. We spent a bunch of money on them. They did not work properly. We had to send them back. And this year, we ended up going with a Canadian company who just produced this model, and it worked really well. I've approached them about putting some kind of a warning beacon on them, and the circuitry and the way these units are configured, they're happy to try to do that, but they've told me it's going to cost a lot of money. So as it is, each one of these receivers is about $15,000. If I can raise the money to do that, I'm happy to put some sort of a warning beacon on it. But realize I'm not that kind of engineer, and I'm reliant upon the people who build these units to do that. And maybe taking one of these units to, I could take it to a number of engineering folks, but it's going to have a price tag associated with it. But I'm willing to try that because I love the idea. I think it's great. I think it's important also to emphasize, this gets to your next couple of questions. The receiver itself, think of it as listening in all directions all the time. All right, it's what we call omnidirectional. And so we don't know what direction the shark is coming from. What we learned with our short-term archival tagging is the sharks will move along the shoreline, but not all of them move along the shoreline. They'll move in and move out. So when one of these receivers picks up a shark, we're learning from our acoustic, Brian's work at the Center for Coastal Studies, that there's a range of about 500 meters, so 5 football fields. So if that receiver is in the middle of a beach area, and if it's a couple of 100 meters offshore, it's going to cover all the way to the shoreline and then out around it in a bubble of about a radius of 500 meters, which is really quite wide. So it's very conservative. The shark may never come within a football field of that beach, but it's going to let the lifeguards know that shark is out there. But we won't know what side of the receiver it's on. It could be approaching from the north or the south or offshore. But it does give, with that 500-yard buffer zone, that's a really good buffer zone. So I don't think putting one on either end of the beach is really necessary given the extent of the range on that receiver.
But if you were able to partner with somebody that, a group or an organization that would fund it, you would move forward with that.
Oh, absolutely. We're only limited. Well, it goes to Mary's, I guess, question. We're only limited by funding, and we have to spread it out accordingly. But yeah, if someone wants to step up and write a check for that, we'll integrate some sort of a light system into it. I don't know how easy that's going to be, but we can try.
And you said that we could reach out to you and we could put people in touch with you. So I appreciate that willingness to do that. That will make a big difference for the people in my community. I just wanted to verify a couple of things that I've heard, around my town, and from people that have positions of authority as well, working within the town, as John was talking, Delegate Oman was talking about the juveniles in the Bay, that the quote was, they're juveniles and they act like juveniles. So as far as swimmers and recreation, people using the bay for that purpose for recreating, that is a concern. I just want to make sure I'm on target with that, and that you said that there were about 200 sharks that you've tagged, and I've heard that some of your estimates are that there might even be upwards of 2,800 or so sharks in any given season here. I mean, are those two things on target?
No, there's a lot that's kicked around on the beaches and in the hallways that we've never stated. Juvenile sharks in the size range of 7-8 feet are not going to approach swimmers in any way. That's not what they do. They're not the perpetrators of these crimes. It's the sharks in excess of 9 or 10 feet that are feeding on seals that make these mistakes. And again, they're rare mistakes, but they happen. So it's larger sharks. They're still juveniles. You got to be careful with the term juvenile, because white sharks don't mature until the males are 12 feet and females are 14. And so, you might look at a big female shark that's 13 feet long, but she's still actually technically a juvenile. She's not mature yet, but she's clearly feeding on seals. They'll start to feed on seals when they get over 9 feet long. And it's the ones that feed on seals that are going to be the problematic ones, because they're the ones that are going to be moving into the shallows trying to attack and kill seals, and they could make the mistake. In terms of numbers, Megan Winton is a PhD student that I work with at the University of Massachusetts. She's also the Conservancy's researcher. She's finishing her PhD on estimating population size. And one of the things we've been very hesitant to do is share any of those results until she's really confident in those results. We want to make sure the error term is low and our variance is down, because as soon as we put a number out there, somebody's going to latch onto it and it's going to explode. It's not an accurate number. It's of no value to us. And so we have not put any numbers out there as of yet. All we do is put out the numbers that we've tagged or the numbers that we've documented any given year based on our underwater video footage. And so what I can tell you is we've identified somewhere around, and it's probably just hovering over 400 individuals over the last 6 years. So 400 individuals is the raw number that we have, that we know over the course of those years that we have identified. That is actually raw data that was going to be fed into a model that will then extrapolate what the population size is. And so 2,800, not sure where it came from, but it's not a number that we've put out there, and not one I would believe.
Well, I appreciate your clarification, and I'm hoping that you'll keep us in the loop and send us any links to any research or any data, as it becomes available, and include with your slide presentation any links to any research and any data that you have at this point. Thank you.
Happy to do that, Delegate. Thank you.
Delegate Harder. Delegate Harder.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Dr. Scomo, this was fabulous. 2 quick questions. One, I represent Harwich, and we had 2 sightings, but we don't have any receivers. Is that going to change?
I've got a receiver. Actually, Delegate, give me 2 seconds. My dog is freaking out. It needs to go outside, and one of my kids isn't here. Let me just sorry about that. Also, I want to just quickly.
Delegate Harder. Delegate Harder, do you mind asking also if towns wanted to get receivers, how they could go about getting them if they wanted to?
Sure.
Money? Thanks.
So we have we do have receiver off of there's a new artificial reef off Harwich that we have a receiver on. It has detected white sharks late in the season, October, on 2 occasions. So my working hypothesis with, for those of you who are interested in Nantucket Sound, Vineyard Sound, is that during the summer months, there are not a lot of seals in the sound, and the water temperatures are quite warm, and the sharks tend to avoid Nantucket Sound. And based on receivers that we have out there and the New England Aquarium has out there, we get very few to no detections until late in the season. It seems that some of the sharks exit the area in October and November, by moving through Nantucket Sound. So we're happy to beef up more receivers in the sound, and we've been reliant on some of our collaborators like the aquarium, which is studying other species of fish, but the technology works for white sharks as well. But if any town wants a receiver, I work with almost all the harbor masters, and we're happy to provide 1 or 2, depending on what our budget looks like and what I've got on the shelf.
Okay.
But we've definitely covered all the way from Boston to Buzzards Bay. There are some holes, but the Cape is pretty well wired up.
Great. And then so a town just has to ask, Patrick.
Reach out to me, and I've got a number of receivers that we've pulled in, and I'd love to fill in holes. So
Okay.
Please reach out to me.
All right. And then my second question is personal. I go boating, and we spend a lot of time in Bass River, and even upriver, in the coves, we saw seals. Is that troubling? It was usually just 1 or 2 that were playing around. I think one day we saw 4 together, but that was it. Does that mean sharks are going to chase them up the river, or are the seals just lost or playing or something?
Well, all I can say is what we've learned, and you never say never, right? Some of you may remember the 2004 white shark that swam into that salt pond at Noshawn Island. And I never would have anticipated that. But white sharks generally do not like, they'll hunt around inlets, but they do not tend to go in them or up into tight areas. They're big fish, many of them weigh thousands of pounds. They don't really deal well with shallow water, and it's a challenge for them. And they don't like to be in tight spaces because of their sheer size. And so we don't have a lot of evidence of them going up into tight areas. I certainly would not expect them to go up into Bass River.
Okay.
So I think you're okay there.
Thanks. That was scary.
Are there any other questions? I don't see any. We got a ton of information today. Dr. Scommel, thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate it. Great job.
So thank you very much. I appreciate the interest that the delegates have. And again, my door is open. Don't hesitate to reach out to me at all, and ask questions or send constituents, whatever. I apologize for not making this happen earlier. It's just Janice and I couldn't make it click, but I'll be happy to give you an update on an annual basis if that's something that interests you. And again, don't hesitate to reach out.
Thanks again.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to go back just in case there were some people anticipating a long presentation there and may have wanted to make communications. Are there any communications from any public officials? I don't see any here. And any communications from any members of the public? No. Okay, well, let's convene. The assembly will now convene. Are there any committee reports of the assembly? Okay.
Patrick.
Yes.
Patrick,
Yes.
If I might, this is not exactly a committee report, but as the representative to the Human Rights Advisory Commission, I should just report that this morning, Wednesday morning, was the fall Human Rights Academy. It was virtual for the first time. It's usually last few years it has been at the Cape Cod Academy. This year was a virtual presentation. It went off quite nicely, and there was a whole variety of high school students talking about what they're tackling. And what's most impressive is that the events of this year, this last 6 or 8 months, have really galvanized a tremendous amount of energy and interest around human rights issues. And these kids are, I'm sorry, they're not kids. These young adults are extremely articulate, and it's really quite impressive. Planning is underway for the Human Rights Day breakfast on December 10th. But anyway, the Academy, which is the high schools participating, will happen again in the spring. Anyway, that's just an update.
Thanks very much, Delegate O'Malley. Are there any other updates or committee reports?
Hello, is this a good time to withdraw a resolution? It's Randy Potash here.
Oh, yes. Let's go to other business. We'll get to that then. Is this a resolution coming from a committee?
No, I just wanted to
Okay.
make sure I got this in, so I chimed in.
Okay. So we're going to move on now to any, since there are no other committee reports, do we have a report from our clerk?
Oh, yes, I'll be as brief as possible. Good evening, delegates. And I have a few items to report to you on. First is I'm operating this evening under the benefit of using new equipment. And what a change it has made. I'm no longer working in the shadows or in the dark. The camera is functioning perfectly. The laptop, unbeknownst to me, sometimes you get used to using defective equipment and you just adapt. And I've been adapting to it for a long time and realizing that I was putting the meeting at risk and my ability to remain connected and needed to make an upgrade change. So happy to report that that has happened. IT has been wonderful and very helpful. It's a conversion, and you know how conversions go sometimes. So it's been a process of about a week to make sure that everything is connected well and up and running. And I'm no longer in panic mode. It's going very well. The only thing, I was probably a little distracted this past week and neglected to send a Zoom link in your meeting packet. So thank you, Linda Zern and Jim Killian, for asking me where that was today, and tried to make it a last minute adaptation to get that to you, and hopefully that worked. I see everyone, so I guess it did. Also, to let you know that I'm in the process of finalizing the certification of votes for commissioners and assembly delegates. That's gone exceptionally well this year, probably the best in the 5 election cycles that I've had the pleasure of doing this. Your respective town clerks have been outstanding, the boards of registrars, and happy to say that I got the last pieces I need today, so I'll be moving forward on that and in a timely manner, and hopefully able to meet all the deadlines that I need to with the state elections division. So be on the lookout over the next 2 or 3 weeks. You will get via email your certification from me as delegates, and you'll be all set and ready to go with the new session starting in January. And also, as a final note, just to let you know and remind you that I will be on a leave of absence for about a month. No surprises. I'm getting another new hip, and Owen Fletcher will be functioning in my absence. But, you know, I still have email and the phone still rings. So I don't expect I'm going to be in a coma and incapacitated. And I like to stay active and involved. So keep the emails and the questions and the calls coming. You are going to get a response. No need to worry about that. And we'll make sure everything is covered. And, you know, I look back on this year and think about the things that you have accomplished. And looking back, it's like, wow, you've dealt with like 30 proposed ordinances this year. A couple of them lingered from previous years, 8 resolutions. So that's not too shabby. And who knows, there may be a couple more coming before the end of the year, but you should be proud with regards to all that you've accomplished. And the only thing I can say is I really miss the in-person contact, seeing each of you, but this has been great. It's been working, and you managed to get the job done. So that's it. That's all I have to report. And hopefully I'll be back before the last meeting at the end of the year, certainly as an observer, if not your clerk. So happy to say that. So enjoy the holidays that are coming up. Thank you. That's all I have to report this evening.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to other business. Delegate Potash?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker. So I would like to please withdraw, sorry about the dog, Resolution 1904 at this juncture.
Okay, thank you.
Housekeeping?
Yes, and the clerk had heard that, and that would be withdrawn.
Thank you.
Is there any other business from any delegates? I don't hear any. Could I please have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, have a happy holiday, everybody, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Goodbye.
All those in favor?
Thank you.
We're